How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. So,
yes, Faiza, we can go.
great. So hello everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Candid with P SHA. And today we are continuing with our discussion from last week about hiring the right CTO or a technology leader in your organization. So we have 4 panelists today. We have Imran, Moinuddin, Sakina, Abbas, Owais Anjum, and Umair. I'm not going to introduce them in detail. I will let them talk about their work. And my name is Faiza Yousuf. I work at Genetech Solutions as a senior product manager, and I run a coding bootcamp called Code Girls and a community initiative called Women in Tech PK. So let's start with introductions. Maybe we can start with you, Imran. Take a couple of minutes and talk about your work, please.
Sure. So Imran Moinuddin, I'm heading up a company by the name of NexDegree, headquartered here in Karachi. What we are is we're a data analytics consulting company. We've been doing this for almost a decade, working with companies, across the globe, whether they come from retail, aviation, urban development, the financial sector, where our goal is to really get into the trenches with these businesses, understand how they make decisions, and determine whether data can be complementary to how they make decisions and strategize. So yes, our work has been primarily services focused over the past decade, but over the last 2 years, we've been making some successful forays, alhamdulillah, in the product space. But yes, enjoy the work that we do.
Thank you so much, Imran. Umair, maybe you can go next and talk about your organization and yourself.
Sure. I'm Umair Javed. I'm the founder and CEO of Tkxel. We are based out of Lahore and US, primarily a software services company. We are over 500 people into 3 different spaces: bespoke software development, Salesforce as a solution system, as well as AI and machine learning and blockchain. So these are the 3. The third one we really call innovation. Primarily a services company with all North American customer. That's what Tkxel is. Besides that, I had been an instructor for quite some time at LUMS and other universities, but that's way back in 2010. I do angel investing with local startups. So that's my company's intro.
Great. Thank you so much, Umair. Sakina, maybe you can go next.
Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sakina Abbas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ReacTree, which is a software house that I co-founded back in 2018. And I am also a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart. So basically at ReacTree, we are a software house specializing in web application development, mobile application development, and data analytics and visualization for multiple clients. So basically the clients that we primarily target right now are small SMEs basically, and startups who are just growing and who have established their business plan and are about to go big in the next 2 to 3 years. Primarily, our clients are located more across the US, the UAE, and Australia. So yeah, we're basically creating custom solutions for them as per their requirements.
Thank you, Sakina. Owais, maybe you can go next.
Thank you, Faiza. My name is Owais Anjum. I'm the CEO and founder of eMumba. Background is I graduated from GIK back in '97. This was the very first batch. Worked in Lahore for a couple of years. Uske baad I moved to the US, worked in the US for 6 years, did my MBA. And then 2006 onwards, I've been settled in Islamabad. When I moved back from the US, though, I set up an offshore center for a company that I was working for in the US, New Metrics company ka naam tha. 5 saal usko chalaya, then it got acquired by McKinsey. Then the midlife crisis hit. So I did my first startup in 2011. It was a product-based startup, Crickout, sporting industry, that failed. Did my second startup, which was focused on the healthcare market, particularly in the US, breast cancer patients, that also failed. Then 2015 onwards, we sort of diversified into doing services. So eMumba in its current form, you can perhaps think about it as its 3rd incarnation. So abhi we are around a 200 people company. Just like Umair said, हमारा भी 90% revenue US, primarily West Coast से आ रहा है. And we focus in 4 areas. The first one is we specialize in developing applications for the enterprise networking industry. Think about companies like Cisco, Juniper, A10s of the world. So उनकी appliances, उनकी cloud के ऊपर जो applications चल रही होती हैं, which are primarily web applications, we specialize in developing those. The second one is data engineering. We do not do machine learning. We do not do AI. We just do the plain vanilla data engineering stuff in open source, AWS and Azure. The third one is DevOps. And the fourth one is a vertical that we have been incubating for the past 2 years. It's a low latency group that we've just spun out. It's a branding spin out, accelerated software. And initially we are focused on the crypto trading market. And the goal is to raise capital and run it like a proper startup during 2022.
Right. Thank you so much, Wes. So last week we spoke about the need for a technology leader in a products company. And of course, this week we are talking about services company because we understand that the context differs. But a lot of times these lines are blurred. So a lot of people are working in both sectors or have moved from one sector to another. I have prepared questions for each of you separately, but I would want it to be a free to jump in to answer any question that you want. So the main question that we want to answer via this panel is how has the role of a CTO or a technology leader evolved in the last 5 years? And what do you see as a technology leader yourself in the next 5 years or so? This is the question for all of you. So, anyone can start and then other people can jump in. Maybe Sakina, you would like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that I have noticed is that the tech space was quite different back then than it is right now. Even though I'm in a panel with you guys, really accomplished and experienced people of your company, and even though I don't have as much experience as you guys, but I have been working with a lot of organizations since back. And I was probably in my A-levels, I think, and that was, I don't know, like 8 or 9 years ago or something. So back then, I remember the kind of technology leaders that I had to work with, what their mindset was, and what friction there was. So if we're talking about the recent 5 years, I would say that before, technology leaders were more invested in technology operations, like the day-to-day operations, like developing solutions themselves, assessing the quality of the code themselves, assuring whether the product is up to the mark themselves. Like they were just very deeply engrossed and engaged in those daily technology, tech operations. But now we are noticing that there has been a major shift in their mindsets, in the sense that now the tech leaders or the CTOs, they're mostly inclined towards innovating solutions, coming up with solutions, innovating things, streamlining things, and all in all, just coming up with the right strategy in order to execute a vision or to get that vision's execution in place. So there was a study that I recently came across that it said that there was a survey that was conducted with the evolution of the CTOs that the world has witnessed in the last 5 to 7 years, and what that feedback revealed was the fact that there has been a major shift, this shift from operations to innovation and strategy that I was just talking about. This major shift was witnessed about 3 years ago. And there were 2 key factors behind this. One, obviously, because the tech space and the tech overall ecosystem, it's evolving in a different sphere at a different rate. The things or the technology that we used to work with back then, they are kind of getting outdated now or just deprecated. And there are just better ways to do certain things that we would spend hours doing back then. So there's obviously the evolution of tech in point here. And the other thing obviously is COVID. So when the world was struck with COVID, all businesses had to streamline their processes. They had to rethink their business models. They had to do a little bit of shifting here and there just to adapt to the situation, because obviously it is a pandemic, and we had to adapt accordingly, right? So the CTOs, they obviously had to change their mindset. They had to adapt to the rising situation. And they had to come up with multiple solutions or multiple strategies that they could then set in motion for their companies and for their customers and clients. So this is what we have noticed. And as far as the next 5 years is considered, I think that's a big number. We should think about what the tech leaders might be looking like in the next 2 to 3 years. Just as an example, Meta. So metaverse is something that is just booming in the tech industry and in the world. अभी Facebook ने उसका सिर्फ एक छोटा सा vision देके छोड़ा है, and already the C-level executives or just the tech leaders, they're already thinking about what this Meta is, how they might be adapting to it. Should they even adopt to it? Is this even viable? Would it be viable for their own business, for their clients, for their customers? So a lot of thinking is involved here, and that is what a tech leader is now involved in: strategies and innovations and not operations. So that's what I have in mind.
So
Right.
I get,
Umair,
yeah. So I think it's an interesting perspective that Sakina has brought up. But generally, what I've seen over time is, I mean, I think the topic was really how to hire a CTO, and initially I said to Atala that yeah, services company mein CTO ka kya role hoga, and then I went about thinking about that, and since I started this company like 12 years back, and we have gone through various stages. So I feel within a tech company, or within any company for that matter, within services and product, there are several areas that you need to take care of, which is people, process, product, technology, and so on. I think one very important distinction is that as you grow, there are multiple roles. So for instance, what I typically see at this scale, there are a couple of roles in any company when you have scaled to a certain level. There's a role of a CTO, which is a technology or technological visionary of the company. I mean, the CTO really needs to set the technical direction of the company, what tech we are going to use, how we are going to build. I mean, these are the guys who can endlessly talk why Ruby on Rails will not scale and why Python can scale. And they'll have their opinions. They have their tech opinions about anything. Whether you should be using Git or you should be X, or and then they also work with the other C-level to really figure out what the product they are building and what is the right stuff to do in terms of technology. Then comes the role of the VP of engineering, which is essentially a role of delivering engineering. So while CTO sets the direction of the technology direction of the company, the VP of engineering is the one who's going to implement it. He is the one who's going to take and deliver what has been envisioned. Now, I mean, I understand that your question is how this role of the CTO has evolved. I, in my opinion, do not really see that role has evolved much, other than the CTOs have to consistently adapt themselves to what is out there. And CTOs can even have their own R&D divisions where they have people churning out the basic tech, new tech, and figuring out what is possible, what is not there, what is the benefits or pros and cons or merits or demerits of using one tech versus another. So the role of CTOs has remained, in my opinion, kind of more or less same, while the role of the VP of engineering has remained same as well. What has changed, obviously, in terms of Pakistan, in terms of whether the companies are getting bigger. So the companies that used to be like 10 people are now getting to 100 people stage. Companies that used to be 100 people are now getting to 300, 500 people stage, and so on and so forth, which means that there are more and more bifurcation of work that is coming in. So for instance, if I talk about Tkxel, I mean, if I think about ourselves sometimes back, I think VP of engineering was all what we needed. Who can, once the customer, VP of engineering is a guy who has enough technical chops but he's not potentially into active coding anymore, but he can code if there is a need. But he is a people's person. He can manage people, he can hire, fire, make sure there are deliveries happening, and making sure that he can get into the customer calls and or can impress. I'm talking from a services angle. Now, at this scale, we feel that we also need a CTO. So we are in a race of constantly upgrading ourselves constantly. We work for our customers. They have their own CTOs who run their products. But as a company, we are a technology company that serves to many CTOs. And so our internal CTO is responsible to make sure that what technology we need to make sure that that can really happen, that we serve our customers well, how we can really create the path of upgrading of technology within the company. If we are using this tool set versus that tool set to deliver the best quality stuff out there. When you're a small company, potentially, I used to say to people that in a small company, the CEO is actually the chief everything officer. He's really not the executive officer. And in a large company, the CEO should make himself to be a chief extra officer. He should be redundant in terms of doing day-to-day operations. So when you're similar stuff goes for the CTOs. In a smaller company, if you're like 5-10 people, a CTO needs to be doing VP of engineering stuff. He needs to be doing process thing. He needs to be the technical guy. And if you are also delivering projects which are worth like $15,000-$20,000, then you may not need a rocket scientist to do that. As you grow up, you are moving up in the value chain. You're moving up with the size of the projects. You're moving up with the tech. You're moving up with the complexities. Owais is serving to a lot of enterprises. So the enterprise is a different beast as compared to a startup. Then you start getting to see different roles who need to have different expertise. And that's, I think, has been fairly consistent over the past few years. And I see it fairly consistent over the next few years as well. These are my 2 cents.
Yeah, Owais, maybe you can chime in here.
I'll try not to repeat the things that have already been outlined, but generally speaking, जैसे उमैर ने कहा है ना कि services company में CTO का role, and you sort of scratch your head. Historically that has been true. So to me, I don't see this as a question of how the role is evolving. I think I see this more a question of how the role is emerging. और emerging, I think उसका एक factor size भी है. और उसका एक factor opportunity का spectrum भी है, right? So to me, whether that role is held by an individual or it is being performed by a group of individuals in the company, it has to be performed no matter what the size of the company. As we grow, of course, we have the luxury and necessity of having, specific individuals holding certain roles. The way I see this, for a company, let's say the size of eMumba, around 200 people working primarily with enterprise customers, CTO का जो function है वो बहुत important है, and to me it is outward facing as well as inward facing. Outward facing का context ये है कि these people need to know what are the opportunities that are relevant for Pakistan. And it's very important to emphasize the latter part, relevant for Pakistan, because every shiny opportunity is perhaps not relevant for us. It has to be contextualized into what kind of talent we have, what kind of delivery can we do, right? And just to give, इसको थोड़ा clarify करने के लिए, there's tremendous opportunity on the hardware side. दुनिया में बहुत काम हो रहा है, but is Pakistan ready for it at the moment? No. There's tremendous opportunity in the security space, right? हम अगर US की market में काम कर रहे हैं और हम security के spectrum में जाने की कोशिश करें, it would be a very, very unwise thing, because Pakistan would get flagged very quickly because of certain other reasons, right? So you have to understand the overall dynamics. उसमें geopolitical dynamics भी हो सकते हैं, उसमें बेशुमार other factors भी हो सकते हैं. So what is the opportunity? Contextualizing it with what can be done well in Pakistan, and then the capability of the organization, right? We cannot come up with ideas which are radically different from what the organization has already been doing, right? So it has to be somewhat relevant. So eMumba में हम लोग पिछले, I think हर साल there is this exercise where we figure out, okay, what tools, technologies, frameworks do we stop using? What tools, technologies, frameworks do we start using? what verticals do we abandon? What verticals do we embrace, right? Or these are questions, they're not easy to answer, but the answer fundamentally comes from the person who's holding the role of the CTO or the group that's sort of performing that function.
Right, Imran?
Sure, and I think that, as we're kind of talking about roles, it's also important for us to really take a step back and look at what's happening in the broader technology landscape, regardless of the vertical we're looking at. So what we are seeing is a fundamental commodification of technology. And in a lot of cases, even advanced technologies like AI as well. So when we hear, read, or think about things like low-code, no-code platforms, all of a sudden, technology is going through a very strong phase of democratization. Now, from a CTO's perspective, it's important to not only think strategically, but also really aligning specific strategic product or business needs to the right choices within the technology, regardless how easy or difficult it is to access, or regardless of whether we are talking about delivery or we're talking about how he or she needs to go ahead and adapt the organization. Now, we're already seeing this transformation. We're already seeing this happen over the past several years, and this will continue into the future, where we will see CTOs playing the role of master aligners. Okay, so really aligning the right technologies to the right problems, and then preparing the organization for that evolving landscape, which, like I just painted right now, is going to be very democratically driven. Yeah.
Right. And definitely, I think for a company that works in services, a CTO also needs, as I think Owais mentioned and other people also, that a lot of the role is also about talking to people and talking to clients as well. So some level of human skills or some level of outward facing leadership skills are really important. Imran, let's start with a question for you. So as your company works more in data analytics, and so what are the core skills you look for if you are hiring for a CTO, and how is it different from any other company? So for a company that is just working in maybe developing apps, how is it different from your organization?
So as a company, Faiza, that works across a lot of different verticals and of companies of various sizes, albeit enterprise focused, for starters, the role needs to be very cross-functional. And frankly, and I think Umair touched on this before too, that the role shouldn't be confused with engineering management or being a director of engineering. So in terms of drivers for us, it's important for this CTO to be academically inclined, particularly in our line of work, who will have an appreciation of both customer as well as client strategy, and really planning for scalability and really planning for technology readiness at the start line. So this individual is not just reacting, but proactively planning for directions that the company needs to go ahead and take. Now, specifically to data, whether it is like data engineering or data science, it's no secret that this is a very rapidly evolving space. So we expect our CTO to read aggressively, which includes like going into research papers by leading industry experts and academia on a weekly basis. Now, technology and data can be a funny thing, right? So technology can place you ahead of the curve, sure, but it can also make you irrelevant just as quickly if you lag behind. And a good CTO in data knows this. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Wes, let's talk a bit about maybe your personal journey as a technology leader. So from a services company to an award-winning fintech product, what is this journey like for a technology leader like yourself, who already have academic background of being an engineer?
I think पहली चीज तो ये कि I feel flattered in terms of being called the technology leader. I do very little technology. I'd like to believe I do, but I don't actually. And I think it's been decades since I've done hardcore technology. It's more about people. It's more about business. But लेकिन जैसे मैंने शेयर किया कि हमारा जर्नी काफ़ी atypical इस तरह से था कि we started off with being a product-based company. We tried twice, failed twice, and then sort of diversified into doing services. And this doesn't mean that we look down upon services. It's a breadwinner. It's a very, very important function. It's a prime function. लेकिन हमारा जो focus है in terms of what we want to do with products and solutions is perhaps rationalized based on the experiences that we had in the past. It is incredibly difficult to develop a product. But the reality is that it is 10 times harder to convert that product into a real business, right? And every services company is a wannabe products or a solutions company because, yes, I mean, services companies become profitable, they're low risk, and you can grow well. But after a certain point, you start feeling the pain of, this grant work. You want to, the hockey stick effect is what you want to seek, right? So there were two things that we sort of decided. Number one, that if you were to do solutions or products in the future, we would perhaps be willing to take the technology risk, but we would not take the go-to-market risk, which means that we would be perhaps more looking towards joint ventures where the go-to-market is being taken care of by a credible partner who has nailed it, and we can de-risk the technology part. That was the first sort of realization or the strategy that we had. And the second thing is that if I think I'm the CEO and I can be the CEO of another product-based company, the reality is that if I quit my job or my role at eMumba, start a new company, a product-based company with 100% focus, there's still a very high chance of it being a failure if it's a product-based company, right? So to assume that I can do that while being the CEO of a services company and still be somehow successful is just not a rational expectation, right? So the second realization is that we will not get into any kind of a product or a solutions-based venture until and unless we have what we may call the CEO, right? And the CEO are not somebody who you can hire, right? It's a certain DNA, it's a certain drive that people have to have. I mean, if it were as easy as to hire somebody and sort of, give them the hat of a CEO, life would have been a lot easier. It just doesn't work that way. So our journey has been that we had tons of product-based ideas. We had tons of solution-based ideas that we said no to. We continue to do that every single day. The fintech venture was an exception where, as I was perhaps sharing earlier, that one of my very good friends who used to work in the US, in Apple actually, with a background in hardware, he moved back to Pakistan and joined us, right? And he was just an extraordinary person, right? And we knew that we could do something amazing with that kind of a talent coming back to Pakistan. So that was the genesis of this new journey. And in reality, he came back with a background in complete hardware, ASIC design. What we built is completely different, right? But that was the contextualization that, okay, we cannot do hardware in Pakistan, but what is something that is closer to hardware, where the knowledge of hardware can be beneficial and useful, hence the low latency fintech applications, right? So I think we have developed something incredible. We've gotten early traction, but we are far from a point where we can call it a success, a business success. It is a product success. We have achieved product success in the past as well, but it's not yet a business success. So I think the jury is still out.
Right. Again, but the part that you guys do in terms of making sure that the product works, you have done that. So I will still call it a success. Sakina, a question for you. So for a small, robust company and a team like yours at ReacTree, what kind of decisions are part of a technology leader's daily activities? So we just want to take a look at, a day in your life.
Right. Okay. So that's actually a very interesting question because ReacTree in itself is a very happening and a very fast-paced place. I was actually just having this discussion with my CTO Abdullah today, just before this session. So as far as decisions are concerned, I would put it in a way that there are many decisions to take and there are many things to review every day in terms of from the perspective of technology or development in the ecosystem. So first of all, the decisions are rapidly changing because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the people that we're working with, the companies that we're working with, they are either established in itself and established in a way that their systems are present, but they're legacy systems and we're obviously converting them. Then there are companies who have just received funding and they're building out their product and they're just putting it out in the market. So obviously we're really responsible for ascertaining and ensuring that the tech stack that we've chosen for them is optimized, it's cutting edge, it's something that the community is very cautiously supporting, and obviously there are many factors associated to it. So pretty much every day we, just like Owais, I believe, said that we do that exercise that, hey, the thing that we're currently doing, is this right? Is it cost effective? Is it performant? There are multiple questions that need to be answered, which we do that every day. And aside from that, because the client, because of the companies that we're working with, they're just building out their business plans. They're even iterating on them based on their market that they're targeting. These decisions have to be very cautiously taken in a very systematic way. So obviously there's that. And other than that, so this is like the client side of things or the companies that we're working with side of things. Then the other spectrum is obviously the team that we're working with. The team that we're working with is very dear to us in terms of that we like, or in fact, we love working very closely with them. So we like to see our team thriving in a very challenging environment, that their learning is not being stopped or it's not being paused in any way whatsoever. So we're constantly encouraging them to learn new things. If they're working in a specific, or if they're specialized in a specific tech stack, then we encourage them, we give them tutorials or multiple courses that, hey, check this out and this will definitely, be of value to you, to the company. So there's this learning and training side of things. And obviously the third aspect is what I would call the leadership side of things, in which you are assessing what work you have done so far, what work you need to do next, and just creating this technical strategy, because we already have the vision in place. We don't build that every day, obviously. We just build that, like, let's say at the start of the year, and then vision for the next 1 year or the next quarter or so. And so obviously we need to, figure out, are we on track? The strategy that we had come up with previously, is it right? Do we need to modify it? Is it being executed properly? So these are a couple of things that our CTO and that our technology leaders we're constantly and very heavily invested in from time to time. So this is kind of what it looks like from a bird's eye view at ReacTree.
Right. Thank you so much, Sakina. So, Umair, a question for you. As we know that your company works in emerging tech vertical as well. So are there any specialized skills that are required both in terms of technical and leadership skills? So what are you looking for in a technology leader if you're hiring for your own company?
I was on mute, sorry. So the Faiza, hiring, I mean, this is a question that constantly, we keep thinking about it constantly, that who we want to hire, whether can we hire all the A+ guys in the world, whether, I mean, how we really hire, what is a company, what is a product and all that. So, पहले तो उसमें ज़रा आ जाते हैं कि हम hiring करते हैं कैसे या करनी की चाहिए कैसे. So I fundamentally we try to look for fundamental strong skills. We do not hire for technology ever, and that had been a kind of core hiring philosophy for the last many years, that we want to. I mean, that helped it. I was privileged in many ways because I had a computer science and electrical engineering degree, even though now I'm only technical enough to be dangerous. As Abbas has mentioned, कि हम लोग move कर चुके हैं sales में. I figured out that probably technology तो बन जाएगी, उसको sales पता नहीं कैसे किया जाएगा. So I moved myself into more of a business development and sales part, and taking care of that for the last 7-8 years. And being a tech guy, I had to learn it and then applying technology to it. But coming back to when it comes to technology and technology leadership, I have seen people and their career going down the drain because they were kind of married to a technology. And I would say syntax driven people. It's like you know English, but you cannot eloquently speak और राइट एन एस एन एट, या आपको उर्दू आती है तो आप उसमें कुछ लिख नहीं सकते, तो लैंग्वेज आना तो ऐसे ही है. और जैसे जैसे ऊपर जाता है, when you really go towards middle and higher management, it becomes all the more important. So while it's important that you have a technical depth in at least one or two areas because you need to understand the concepts, it's also important that your fundamental skills are right. You understand how the software gets engineered, how the software gets designed, and then what are the fundamental processes, design steps, design principles that are out there. And then you can see how they can be mapped onto any given technology. If you can do that, then moving on to a newer technology or jumping onto a newer technology is something which is very easy. If you're not, then you are at best a technologist who can work in a particular technology and so on. So while we hire technology leaders these days, I think as I said earlier, at this scale, we have two kinds of requirements in terms of the top level guys. So if I'm going to hire, and that has also shown in the tracks of the company. So we have two tracks: a track that leads to be that leads you to be a CTO, and a track that leads you to be a VP of software engineering. So if you are hiring a technology leader for a CTO track or something, you really need to see how if they have a deep understanding of technology principles, if they have opinions, if they can back them up, what is the kind of contribution they have made overall to date in terms of creating something, in terms of laying down the architecture stuff. So you really don't see how well they can manage 100 people, or are they very processized, or are they I mean, if this is all there, then it's an icing on the cake, but you hardly get that. So you really see their core technology strength if you're hiring for a CTO track or a chief architect track, sometimes even a solution architect. When you hire for technology leadership in the VP of engineering track, then you're really looking for people who have enough technological background and they have done and delivered systems, but they have their softer side, their EQ side, their people side intact as well. As a company, we want to be a highly quantitative company. I mean, so I'm of the opinion that 80% of the decisions are really not decisions. They should be a mere representation of facts if you have a data. And there should only be 20% that should be called really a decision. I mean, if you have data, a software engineer should be able to make a decision. So what we try when we try to hire VP of engineering kind of people, we see their people side, we see their technology side, but we also see their kind of side ability to create processes, highly effective systems that can measure in various dimensions and can use their data to improve the organization. So, I mean, many times your VP of engineering is also a black belt in Excel, and they can data slice data, can take trends out of it, can design systems to measure effectiveness, can design systems that can deliver value. So that's what we do in terms of hiring. If we are hiring for a VP of engineering track, we see the people skills, we see the technology skills, we see their ability to measure and improve. If we are hiring for the pure technology track, we see their depth in technology, what kind of readings they have done, have they published something, have they contributed to open source, have they wrote complex stuff, have they what kind of, I mean, what are their technological kind of directions or tastes and so on and so forth. So this is something that we do.
Right. Maybe Wes, you can jump on in that. I have just a random question out of it. So will you be looking for an engineering degree when looking for a CTO or, or a VP of engineering, or do you think a self-taught person, can have enough skills to become a VP of engineering?
I don't care about the degree. It's really about the skills and the capabilities and the competencies. Most of the ones that Umair already outlined, it's pretty much in line with that. Whether it is coming through a formal degree program or otherwise, it doesn't really matter. If somebody is self-taught, and in fact, I mean, that's a bigger testimonial to the drive and the initiative that the person is demonstrating. So degree doesn't matter.
So I just want to add something to it, Faiza, that I mean, I routinely tell people these days that in this age, if you give me an excuse that you don't know something because you have not been taught that, then absolutely you are not for this company. I mean, I can rewind myself back, and I'm sure Abbas, we are of the same dinosaurs of the same era, where we have to probably gather like 20 books to understand one concept. There was dial-up internet and hardly any resources. Now with Coursera, Udacity, Udemy's of the world, I mean, you just cannot say that you cannot, you did not get the chance to read upon something. So one thing we absolutely look for is the drive. How much they have added to their knowledge, even if they have had a 16 years of education or 18 years of education, how much they have added to their knowledge after that. So self-taught, being self-driven is absolute necessity. And that should answer your question, that I don't mind if my CTO doesn't have any formal education. They just need to know their stuff and be good at with the skill.
And on a related note, I'd like to share one data point. 30% of our engineering talent pool does not have a computer science degree. They have a different degree.
Right. Imran, a question for you. So how do you think a CTO can impact the culture of an organization? And do you think looking for a cultural fit when it comes to hiring a CTO is the right way to go about it?
So there's no doubt that technology is like sitting at the heart of product and service delivery for a lot of firms. It doesn't matter if you're a services firm or a tech firm or a non-tech firm. So the cultural exchange, it has to work both ways. Now, so a good CTO needs to be receptive to the challenges of legacy of the organization, needs to be receptive to pushback that he or she is going to see when new technology gets rolled out. So subsequently, therefore, he or she needs to really walk a fine line between technological enablement and organizational expectations. And what a CTO should never do is try to shove technology down people's throats. Now, whether that is within the organization or for your clients or partners. So in a very practical sense, the CTO should really drive a culture of looking at ways to drive intervention in problems that have the highest impact, but require the least amount of technical complexity. So think 80-20 rule for a moment. So a CTO should really be up there with the CIO and the CEO to fundamentally drive a culture of learning, reading, presenting within the organization, which unfortunately we don't see very often in a lot of Pakistani tech or non-tech organizations. Now, that said, doing so is hopefully going to keep the organization engaged, and subsequently the stakeholders and folks who are party within the organization to be more receptive to future interventions or transformations. So it's a two-way street, Faiza.
Right. What do you think, Sakina, about that? Do you think when hiring for a CTO, we should look for a cultural fit?
I think we definitely should, because an important thing to notice here is that the C-level executives are just the tech leaders in itself, are basically the leaders of the company, or the individuals who are driving the culture and who are setting the tone for a specific company. So obviously, in terms of cultural fit, you need to obviously see that the CTO or the person that you're trying to hire their values match the values of your company. I mean, in essence, every individual is different from everyone else, but there are certain morals, there are certain values that just like, you know, you just sit, you talk with them, and you're like, we click. Our frequency is at the same level. So obviously there needs to be some kind of values, some kind of cultural values that are in like, you know, that are common to you, to the leaders of the company. Because if you are hiring someone who is of a completely different mindset, who has completely different values, then it would kind of throw off the synchronization of the company. It would just throw it off balance. So to an extent, you definitely need to look at it. And obviously when in companies, the team in essence is looking up to their leaders, and they're learning and they're trying to mimic what their leaders are doing. So for that, everyone needs to be at the same page. And in order to make sure that that's there, you definitely need to look for a couple of values that are common to you. So.
Right. Where's a question for you? So from services to solutions, are there any transferable engineering management skills? So if someone is transitioning from a product company to a services company or vice versa, what are the skills that are common in both types of businesses?
I think अगर हम उसको simply engineering management के context या lens से देखें तो I think there's a lot of things that that are shared across the two dimensions, right? But if you allow me, I think I'd like to perhaps change the scope of the question to really perhaps ask कि अगर आप transition करें from being a services company to trying to become a solutions company, तो what additional skills or capabilities you need to have to be somewhat successful, right? So उसमें अगर देखा जाए तो Pakistan is primarily a services-driven economy, IT के अंदर. So we produce a lot of project managers. जब आप solutions या products की side पे जाते हैं, तो one of the core skills that is required is product management, which is extremely hard to find in Pakistan. The reality is कि ये scale internationally भी universities produce नहीं करती हैं, ये markets produce करती हैं. So if you go to the Silicon Valley, you'll find tons of product managers, but they've been groomed by the industry. So these will mostly be people who have a technology background, who've done technology development for many, many years. And then they perhaps transition into maybe some kind of a marketing role, product marketing, so that they understand what the market landscape is. और उसके बाद उन तमाम चीज़ों का synthesis करने की capability आने के बाद they become product managers. Because I mean, it's a very difficult and a skill that requires multitude of capabilities. इसी तरह से I think जो एक mindset evolve होने की ज़रूरत होती है engineering management के अंदर कि technical delivery is essentially not the end game, it's actually the starting point of something that you want to develop, right? Generally जब हम projects कर रहे होते हैं तो we don't realize कि हमारे पास काम आने से पहले कितनी effort, कितनी मेहनत हो चुकी हुई है business development, because most of our customers are developing products, right? So there's a product cycle जो चल रहा है जिसके अंदर हम as a vendor fit in हो रहे हैं just to deliver a piece of that overall product, right? But there are hundreds or perhaps thousands of hours that have been spent in terms of market ideation, product development, product management, and there will be perhaps as many hours that will be spent after that in terms of trying to find the product market fit, trying to sell it to the customers, getting validation or what have you. तो ये इस mindset को change करना कि अच्छा ये जो हम चीज़ deliver कर रहे हैं, this is not the end game from engineering point of view, this is the starting point of something that needs to be validated, becomes a very interesting transition. इसी तरह से चूंकि आप इस cycle को छोटा करना चाहते हैं, speed up करना चाहते हैं, because if you reduce time to market, just like, you know, agile development and more like a lean startup, you want to do more iterations in the same amount of time, right? So उसमें आपने, you might have to make a lot of technology compromises. You might want to intentionally accrue a lot of technical debt because you want to reduce your time to market, right? Which again is not a typical mindset to have when people come from a services mindset, because they want a certain quality standard to be maintained. The reality is that for any successful startup, पहले 18 महीने में पूरा code redo हो चुका हुआ है. Whatever is written is thrown away and redone, right? So it becomes a very different mindset from engineering management point of view. That okay, we want to be able to make a lot of shortcuts or smart cuts, accrue technical debt, be happy with it, but reduce time to market. और उसके बाद जाहिर बात है जो sales, biz dev, marketing, validation का जो पूरा spectrum है, again, it is something that doesn't exist in a typical services organization. हम सब लोग perhaps services organization से belong करते हैं, तो services organization का sales और business development का जो model है बड़ा different है, right? You know, मुझे अगर एक customer एक quarter में मिल जाता है, it's an enterprise customer, I'll be more than happy with that because I'm limited by the scale in terms of the number of people I have, right? So there's a certain inelastic behavior because of the dependency on the human capital, right? Which goes away with solutions and products, right? So business development का जो challenge है, जो pressure है in a solution or a product-based company, it is much higher as compared with, let's say, services organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I definitely agree because I have also made this transition from being a services person to a product person. So I started my career as an engineer and then moved towards being a project manager and then, you know, move to product. So it's like a very, very different way of working and looking at things because now you are not just responsible to one client that is paying you for your hours, but also the people who are using the application. And in most cases, I'm directly talking to the people who are using the product. And it's a very different way of delivering something and also looking at things when it comes to managing a team and everything. Imran, would you like to jump on that? Maybe talk a bit about what do you think will be the different or same skill set that is required for?
Sure, I think that the gravity is going to shift a little bit more towards the soft skill side of things. Like I was mentioning earlier, with sort of the commodification of technology, with the commodification of being able to carry out advanced technological processes, it's really going to come down to the creativity that teams can show towards solution design, towards product design. And that is going to come through, again, a skill set that really needs to be nurtured, especially in a place like Pakistan. Owais hits the nail on the head. That there is a lack of good quality product management talent here in the country. And the very fact that product managers have a very unique ability to think across different facets allows them to generate things that are fantastic for enterprise, fantastic for consumers. So the gravity is going to focus more, if you ask me, on design and really coming up with creative ways of integrating the right technology pieces to address these challenges. So I don't think that, yes, I'm not going to take away from developments that are going to happen in deep technology. That will continue to make move at its own pace. But because we are seeing that technology becoming easier to access, it's really about figuring out how to access, what to access, and when to access it, depending on the kind of problem you're solving. And I think that is where, whether you're a CTO or a VP of engineering, that is sort of going to be the black art that's going to differentiate the good leadership from the not so great leadership, because I will know that this is sort of the three things that I need to look at when I'm solving a problem for an industry that falls in this particular category. It's that alignment. So I think that is where we're going to see the gravity shift for these sorts of leadership roles, Faiza.
Right. Thank you, Imran. Sakina, question for you. So how important is it for a CTO to have customer relationship management expertise? Do you think that is something that a CTO does when they are in a services company?
Okay, so I think the word expertise is a little extreme here, at least for a tech leader or a CTO, because zaruri nahi hai that they need to be expert in that. It is important, definitely, no one's denying that. And why is it important? Because as we just mentioned multiple times in this panel discussion, a CTO is someone who should not just have the hard skills, he should also have the soft skills, which is what makes him a CTO. Because hard skills is something जो आप with practice, with experience, आप accommodate कर ही लेते हैं, ठीक है? The soft skills is something जिसके ऊपर it's not like something के learn करने से आ जाती है. You need to inculcate it within yourself. So when we're talking about the leaders of a company, when we're talking about the C-level executives, there are people who are coordinating and who are communicating with different stakeholders at all times. So they're communicating with their partners, they're communicating with their teams, they're communicating with the clients or the companies that they're working with, and at times they also need to be aware of the customers, not that actively, but very, very little probability of that happening. So obviously in that, they need to understand how to communicate certain issues to them. So like, let's say, let me give you an example over here. So when you're just onboarding a project, when you're just onboarding a new client, and they ask you to propose a tech stack for a product that you're building for them. So obviously usme kafi keeping their scope in mind, keeping their requirements in mind, and keeping their budget in mind, you need to come up with viable tech stack options for them, right? So now, if let me just give you an example from my recent experience. This is something that I frequently experience, at least in my personal space. So I am a mobile developer as well, obviously, and when we're pitching to clients, some people, in fact many people, they still don't fully understand the concept of cross-platform applications, which is like you just write a single code base and you produce multiple applications from that single code base. So you're not separately maintaining different applications for different platforms like Android, iOS, web, desktop, etc. So this is the concept here, right? So if they're asking us to create a product for them and they're asking us to recommend them a tech stack, and we tell them about Flutter, they're like, why Flutter? Why not go native? I mean, is it native more performant? And they just, put questions like these in front of us. Now, being technically aware, we are aware of the pros and cons of each tech stack and the problems that they might come with or the hindrances that they might cause. So this is one example which I think pretty clearly illustrates why customer relationship management is important, and yet they don't have to be expert in at the same time. Because if we're talking about a CTO, their core expertise lies in technology itself. So it kind of doesn't make sense that because when you already have a team in place to handle these things for you, and it's just under certain special circumstances that your presence or that your communication is required, then yes, you need to deliver that. But other than that, I don't think that they need to deviate from their core expertise, which is the tech, which is the tech space for which they're actually working in. So this is at least my point of view here.
Right. Thank you, Sakina. So we are getting questions from the live audience. The question, anyone can answer that. So given in the regarding university degree, how can a CTO contribute in the field of academics? Like how can they contribute back to our local universities? Anyone can, jump in?
I think it's a pretty interesting question. So the way that you can give back to the community or give back to the academia is by obviously conducting multiple trainings and sessions with the university or these academic institutes. This is the best way that you can do here. And a good example over here is obviously the Google communities are something that are very actively pursuing these in the recent times. If we look back around, let's say 3 years ago or 4 or just 5 years ago, let's keep it like that, we didn't have that many active communities. We didn't have that that go-to person that the students could just go to if they were having problem in certain area of development or any specific area of tech. But now, so many communities have been formed and so many training sessions are happening that this bridge this gap has been bridged, obviously. And this is the best way that you can give back to the community. If you obviously don't have a specific person that you can contact for arranging these sessions, then maybe you can start by writing blogs about a specific thing, that how did you solve this technical issue with this specific technology, or you could create videos, and then that's how you will get noticed. And when universities are arranging sessions, then they will reach out to you themselves like, hey, we've seen that you're an expert in this, could you please, we would love if you could come to our university, have a session on this. So I think this is a pretty great way of doing it.
I'd like to add to this. This is a topic of interest for us as a company, and we've given it a lot of thought. And I think what we have converged on, at least at the moment, is that content orchestration or content curation is where we can add the most value. There's tremendous amount of content, as Umair pointed out, that's available out there. The challenge is not the lack of content. It's really, there's too much of it, right? And figuring out which one to pick and which one to connect with what is really where the value can be added. So what we try to do is that we try to create certain tracks, and then we offer that to the students that they could sort of manage in their spare time or in their summer semester or whatever it is, right? In terms of polishing certain skills, it could also be a matter of polishing their fundamentals, if they feel that they're lacking in those. Here is the curated content that they can follow to polish those skills. So to me, I think content curation or content orchestration is the key focus here.
Just adding on to what Owais was saying, actually, that there is something that organizations like ourselves could definitely offer, to universities or colleges, which is our experience working with industry, both domestically and globally. And the reason why that is important is that a lot of times these students will run through different academic tracks, but until they fully understand how that gets applied, they will never really develop an appreciation for the paradigms that they should be paying more attention on. So really helping them connect the dots that, okay, if you are hating the class around, finite automaton theory, the reason why it's important is because it's used, let's say, in search engines, it's used over here. So when they start thinking in terms of applicability, by presenting them with use cases, how those otherwise very boring topics get applied, that can help inspire a lot of students to not just become more relevant in their roles when they join industry, but also go down some very interesting academic tracks if they ever go for, let's say, a graduate or a PhD degree in future. So I think just presenting use cases is also a very interesting way to really get people excited in academia.
So my take on it is that not having a university degree only stops you in getting a full-time job at a university. It doesn't stop you from teaching or for doing anything else. So I mean, we have created a kind of community channel with the name of Better Tech and all of that. I mean, with the social media, people have made TikTok videos. I mean, for every funny thing they can do, they have YouTube videos. I mean, you can go ahead if you are that super guy who knows the tech but doesn't have the 16 years of education behind you. Why don't create your courses, publish them on YouTube, send them to a few Google community groups and whatnot. And if you're good, people will just make a beeline viewing your courses. So nothing stops you from contributing. And I think more and more software companies are essentially getting to a stage where they are feeling that, okay, university have given a certain amount of education. If we need people and we need them fast, we have to train them. And a lot of companies are having now their own educational tracks, educational certifications and whatnot. And if you're in a company, if you do not have a degree per se, the company won't stop you in contributing to that track. So, I mean, there are a lot of ways to teach and to disseminate knowledge. Getting employed at a university is just one of them.
Right. So Umair, next question for you. So how do you think we can gauge a CTO's leadership style? Is it something that evolves over time, or it's set in stone, someone works in a certain way and they keep on doing that?
So I'm not sure. I mean, I think as a software company, uh, or as a software industry, we are probably the one with the least amount of training. And that applies to leadership and everything as well. So I often tell to people that, look, I'm just the CEO of this company because I was the first guy who joined it. I do not have any other credentials. I mean, other than that. And that happens. I mean, an engineer steps into a company as a software engineer, and like 10, 15 years, one fine day, he found himself to be a CTO. So, I mean, what you want to really judge he may or have a natural leadership style or whatever. So I guess as an industry, we suffer from lack of these softer skills, leadership kind of training. So everyone will have their own styles. I'm not even qualified to even judge a leadership style, but I believe that you need to find someone who is important or fit in your culture, because as they say, culture eats strategy for lunch. So you have people with the right leadership styles who can really motivate people and make them move forward. But I mean, as the company is growing up, and I can hear some of the thoughts of Sakina, and I can relate to them as well. But as the company is growing, I'm getting more and more kind of a different kind of thoughts coming to me. For instance, I've now beginning to find that people who are at really the top of their game, be it at sales, be it at design or arts, be it at technology, they are different individuals. Some they're sometimes very difficult to even communicate with, and that is why they're doing that kind of a stuff. So as I think that's where the leadership style maybe of the CEO matters a lot more, because if you have a CTO is weird or eccentric, you need to, while getting the best out of him, you really need to protect your the company. And so that is where I feel that it's more important to have a VP of engineering and a CTO, two different roles, because VP of engineering can have all the cultural fits, they can talk to customer, build relationships and whatnot, and so on and so forth. And you have this geek technologist who can really kind of be a 10x engineer or 100x engineer who can really multiply that process, but who doesn't know how to communicate, who does not have a leadership style, is more of an individual contributor. Maybe you let him be, as long as they do not have a value which is really not acceptable in your company. My 2 cents. I mean, I could be all wrong.
Wes, any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I mean, I think just extending on that last point, I mean, it's, as long as there isn't a cultural misfit, right? The key thing is, what is the most important value you can draw from these individuals? And obviously, in a perfect setting, you would like to have a CTO who is, an excellent engineer, as Umair said, 100x engineer, and at the same time has a very high EQ. But I mean, those check marks are very rare to be found, put together, right? So I just concur that I think it is as the organizations grow, it is the responsibility of the CEO to ensure that whatever individuals you bring in, you craft your roles around them and not vice versa, because it is very hard to define a JD or a role and try to find a person who fits perfectly into them, right? Which essentially means that when you bring in people, if they're really capable, everybody needs to make certain adjustments, right, to make them successful.
You need to work with their strengths, not their weaknesses. So I think that this is one of the key things.
Right. We have a lot of questions from the people watching us live. I'll just pick a few of them randomly. I don't know who these questions are from, so and anyone can answer them. So recently there is a trend to have COO, CIO, CEO along with CFO and no CTO at all. There are a lot of C's in this. So is it worth taking a risk, or do you think it's a technological suicide?
Yeah. So I guess this is part of people do not understanding the role of each particular person. So, I mean, if you're a tech organization, essentially the roles that you have are CTOs or VP of engineering. CIOs usually come in the organizations who have kind of a different business, and somebody who's taking care of your application or network or other infrastructure, so keeps the company's technology network running. And that they eventually take the role of a CIO, but the business of the organization is something else. But if you're selling a core tech stuff, I mean, you need to have a CTO. CFO is obviously finance guy. Chief operating officer is an interesting one. So I many times I get to interview startups for their pitch, and there are three guys, and they tell me he's the CEO, and he's the COO, and he's the CFO, and he's a CM. And I ask, okay, what kind of operations do you have that COO manages today? And so, I mean, COO we at Tkxel now have a COO because our operations were so much that I needed someone to really manage them. So obviously do not need a COO right at the onset, unless until you are a company that is starting off and you can foresee in 2 months' time you will be littered with a lot of operations. And operations creep into every role. I mean, at the end of the day, if your sales department is big enough, they're going to be sales operations. There's a term called product operations now. I mean, we know product managers, we know X, Y, Z, but as the product becomes larger and larger, there are product operations, and then there are engineering ops, and then there are organizational ops a CEO needs to handle. But is your organization is big enough? So I mean, that rests the case of CEO, in my opinion. The CIO is essentially is more inward looking. He needs to keep running your applications, keep running your infrastructure, keep running. I mean, we are considering potentially even a CIO for ourselves, so that who can create an internal tool set, can keep the internal infrastructure running. I mean, eventually someone graduates to that level. So I mean, if you're a tech company building a SaaS product or a technology services company, you are looking for CEO or maybe CTO or VP of software engineering. That's how it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, Imran, do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I think my advice on this is actually very practical, right? I think what's important to look at is if we pull up the JDs of what a CEO does, what a CIO does, what a CTO does, ask yourself, are these roles that need to be fulfilled, A, and B, when do they need to be fulfilled? So again, as organizations evolve, their needs will evolve, and subsequently, the roles that have to be filled in order to cater to those needs, they will have to be filled as well. So I think that when you look at a CTO position, the question may not be whether you need whether the role is important or not important, but the question is, do you need that role to be filled immediately? Is there something specific that you are reading in the CTO role that requires you to have a dedicated CTO? If you're a startup, and you're a small team, it's sometimes best not to try to, territorialize roles, because inevitably you're going to be wearing different hats at different times. CTOs will be managing, they'll be getting into the gutter, changing the plumbing, etc. But I think that it's best not to kind of demarcate so early on, especially if you're a startup. But again, figure out what it is that you're looking to address that you feel a CTO role is important for. And secondly, determine whether that's a need that you need to fulfill right now, or maybe 3 years from now.
Yousuf, मैं सिर्फ एक बात कहना चाहूँगा कि शुरू में ना थोड़ी सी, और स्टार्टअप्स के लिए शायद ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, ईगोज बीच में आ जाती हैं कि हमें पाकिस्तानी कल्चर में एक सी भी तो चाहिए होता है ना, घर बताने के लिए कि मैं वो हूँ या तो आई थिंक दैट इज आल्सो काइंड ऑफ अ रेसिपी फॉर फेलियर. Imran has aptly put it कि आपका उस रोल की ज़रूरत भी है कि नहीं, और maybe down the lane you need someone really to fulfill that role. So yeah.
Just a quick comment on that. I think generally speaking, ये सारे जो functions हैं, ये आपको day one से चाहिए होते हैं. So if you're the first one joining the company as a CEO, you have to wear all the hats. You have to be the CEO, you have to be the CFO. But at what point do you need to have a C-level role dedicated for a certain function? That's a very significant question. And I think for a services company, that comes at a very late stage. It should come. ये सारे functions इंतहाई अहम हैं, right? For a 500 people company like Tkxel, internal tooling is going to be extremely, extremely important, right? And if it's not given proper attention, उसका impact across the organization बहुत सारी चीज़ों में बहुत significant होगा. So I think these functions have to exist. They need to evolve. But for them to hold a C-level title, I think that comes very down in the journey, very late in the journey.
Right. Okay, so we have another question. Most of the CTOs belong to the backend tech stack as compared to other tech stack. Why is that so?
उसकी रीजन ये कि हमारी यूनिवर्सिटीज ने अभी तक फ्रंट एंड और बाकी जितनी भी चीजें उसको ए क्लास सिटीजन का दर्जा किया, राइट?
तो जावा फॉर द विन।
हाँ, तो द रियलिटी है कि इस वक्त अगर ग्लोबली आप देखें तो जितना बस सॉफ्टवेयर डेवलप हो रहा है उसमें perhaps more than 50% is running on the browser using front end technologies, right? And if you go to your schools, those technologies are not being taught. The reality is that browsers need to be treated and respected like operating systems, because browser is an operating system जिसके ऊपर आपके front end technologies run हो रही होती हैं. So I think it's primarily driven by how the academia is structured, because वही mindset evolve होता है into the ecosystem. अगर आप globally देखें, let's say if you go to the Silicon Valley, historically वहाँ पे जितने भी successful companies हैं, I mean you pick these large companies, Cisco, then Googles of the world, they were all, and they still are, very back-end driven companies, right? Most of their technologies, particularly enterprise networking companies, are all back-end people, right? So आप जो tech hubs हैं दुनिया के, अगर वहाँ पे अगर आप अभी भी जाके distribution देखें, तो there is more talent on the back-end side and there's very less on the front-end side. और front-end पे अभी भी, I think at eMumba about 2 years ago, we created certain classifications. We created a role that, okay, you are a front-end engineer and that's it. At some point, you may want to evolve into a full-stack engineer, but even our engagements with all of our customers are structured very differently. We have done away with the notion of full-stack engineers. So there's a backend engineer, or backend can be classification. Your 3-tier web application is a very different beast. Data engineering is a very different beast. Front end के अंदर अगर आप मोबाइल में काम कर रहे हैं, it's very different. अगर आप वेब पे काम कर रहे हैं, it's very different. We are going towards a micro specialization, right? I mean, there's no notion of a full stack engineer जो यहाँ से लेके यहाँ तक तमाम चीजें करेगा और उसका सब कुछ आता भी होगा. So there's a reason, there's a historical element to it, and there is obviously the academic part to it. That you see that bias.
I'd just like to add to that. So to an extent, I do agree with Owais that obviously the way that academia is structured and the way the courses are structured in the universities, it obviously plays some role in the fact that most of the CTOs, they have a background in backend development, but that's just to an extent, because if we're talking about academia in general, they shove down a lot of concepts to the students, but it's up to the students whether they want to take them forward or they want to learn something new, they want to just adapt to something new, something more interesting, and they pursue that. So that's obviously the reason why to an extent it plays a role in that. But other than that, the fact that the most of the CTOs that have a strong background in the backend development lies in the fact that CTOs are people who love solving problems. They're problem solvers. They love innovating things, and they love getting their hands down and dirty into the nitty-gritties of a problem that they're trying to solve. So their interest, it lies more towards developing or creating solutions in them, rather than just creating a front end for things to that a user can look at and just see everything all connected, all the dots connected, and just see the final thing working. So this is something that I've also experienced with the people that I've worked with, be it CTOs or tech leaders of big established companies or just the ones that are just starting out. I have seen that their interest lies more towards problem solving. And obviously, backend is something that you're creating APIs, you're creating logics, you're just creating this architecture, that how will the services be communicating with each other, and so on and so forth. So this is something that drives them. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why most of the CTOs or the tech leaders, they have a strong background in backend development.
So I also have an opinion. I'm just take like a minute. I think Owais is also right that when he says कि academia उसमें structured है. एक और चीज़ जो मुझे नजर आती है वो ये आती है कि browser, obviously there are now, these are the days of a browser-based application, or not even a browser, I would say. The world has moved to mobile and 70% of the usage comes from mobile. What I really think कि जो front end है, we are aggressively seeing it's getting mixed with the overall product and product teams, because you need to think about product, you need to think about the usability, you need to design front end, because हमने ये देखा और के अंदर कि when your product team and user experience team is different and your front end engineers or your regular engineers, they never manage to create that output of which the user experience team designs, because वो still like engineering problem की तरह देख के अच्छा ये चल तो रहा है बटन ये ऐसा क्यों होना चाहिए, user experience ऐसा क्यों होना चाहिए वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह. So I really now I'm still experimenting. We are still experimenting for that matter, that clubbing the kind of front end with more with product people. And I think the technology, so that eventually leads to maybe, I'm not sure, in the future, a chief product officer or something kind of that role. If CTO is not doing that, and CTO is, since it's tech, it's back end, it's not just the back end, it's the scalability, it's the infra, a lot of, it's not just the problem solving stuff, it's also the containerization करनी है, microservice का architecture, आपने large data को manage करना है. There are millions, billions of rows. आपने बहुत सारा उसका की technology thought process करना है. So I think you need a different mindset. And right now, as Imran has mentioned, probably the legacy is such that people having that skill, they are getting promoted to CTO's level. And while the front end, as we see, getting more and more club with the product people, eventually that role may take some other shape. I'm not sure.
Right. Imran, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think a lot of times that I've seen, it's the organizational philosophy that drives what kind of a person ends up as a CTO, right? So if you look at, for example, a company like Apple, in the Bay Area, a lot of these organizations, have a very design-first philosophy that let's work backwards from the experience, and then we'll figure out sort of the nitty-gritties of the technology later on. I think there has been something, and I know Umair had mentioned that he was experimenting in this space. These are experiments actually that we've run, and successfully so, where we've tried to get our backend people involved in early discussions around the front end and design with the customers. So we like to imagine sort of what the future state looks like and then work backwards from it, much the same way. And we find that it's not like the backend people have this mental block to understand the front end. It's just that it's a new space for them. It's very eye-opening for them. And quite frankly speaking, they find it very exciting. So in some ways, by having that say from a technology perspective, in terms of very guiding perhaps even some of these front-end directions, that's fine. But at the same time, I think it's a matter of exposure. And when it came back to that earlier point as well, that yes, academia ke side pe, it's loaded up with a lot of backend, but how often do you see courses being taught on, let's say, persuasive interface design? Or how do you really design an experience based on different personas, or when you're designing for enterprise versus designing for consumer? There's plenty of literature academically, globally, but I do not see any of that being taught right now at any of our good universities at this moment. That's a challenge, Faiza.
Right. So I have a few more questions, but we are running out of time. So, and I'm pretty sure you all are very busy and do not have time to kind of get into this for another hour or so, because I can see around 10 more questions. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. It was a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Imran, Owais, Sakina, and Umair. I think the gist of it is that it depends on when you're hiring for a CTO role, it depends on the size of the company, where the company is in terms of their growth, what is the skill set like, who are their clients, and what exactly is the culture of the organization, and and do you actually need a CTO at that stage or not. So I hope I was able to ask the right questions, and I hope that people watching have learned something out of it. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to see you guys again.
Thank you very much, Faiza. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
I think you've been a wonderful host. Thank you very much, everybody.
Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, everyone. It was a
Thank you,
great
everyone.
session. Learned a lot from you guys.